Today we're going to do a caramelized onion mini meatloaf and with a sweet potato and sage topping. So we're going to first add this pound of grass-fed ground beef. So we'll add that to our mixing bowl. I'm going to actually add this entire bunch of parsley. We're going to put 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt in. At this point I don't measure at all, so you can play with it, but if you feel more comfortable measuring, just 3/4 of a teaspoon. These are caramelized onions.
Looks awesome.
That have been pre-made. So we're going to throw these in the food processor. It's just going to give a really nice sweetness to the meat and additional nutrition. So we're going to add that to the ground beef. We're going to add a teaspoon of dried thyme. And now I'm going to add in a teaspoon of fresh sage.
Sage is awesome. Love it.
It's awesome. So we're going to put that in there. We're going to get our muffin tray ready. So I'm using extra large parchment paper muffin cups. So we're going to line those muffin cups. We're going to take handfuls of the meat mixture and just form balls. And just plop them into the muffin cups, level off the top so that we'll have a nice surface for the topping once these are done.
So we put it in the oven, Justine, for 350 for 30 minutes, and then we pulled it out. Now we have this amazing looking muffin, but we want to spice it up a little bit, right?
Right. So now we're going to take our topping. So this is a white sweet potato that I've roasted for about 25 minutes at 350.
Okay.
We're going to put it on top of the meat muffin.
Make it look like a cupcake.
Yeah. So this is your icing. And you can tell your kids that if you need to the first couple of times you feed them this way, so that they can have fun with it too. And then I have some minced garlic scapes, and so I'm just gonna use those as a garnish. If you think the scapes are gonna be too spicy for your kid, then you can use parsley or a little bit more pepper, or you can just leave it as is.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Autism Intensive. It's Mike Mutzel here. Today we're in the kitchen with Justine Stenger. She is a therapeutic chef and works a lot with children with autism and their families. And so today we're gonna make Justine's gonna make and show you how to make excellent meat muffins. And so one of the things, Justine, that like being a father and having a little girl and stuff like that, you know, food really needs to look cool and look fun because there's this draw and attraction to junk food, and you've created this amazing muffin that's made out of meat and vegetables. It looks awesome. So talk to us about that and like, how'd you get this idea?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me.
Sure.
And yeah, in my experience, I've just found that kids are more likely to eat healthy food when it looks pretty or fun. So I do my best to try to make things for them that they're excited to eat and they look at, and you know, it looks appealing to them. So, and while doing that, I want to pack in as much nutrition as I possibly can for those little kiddos. So today we're going to do a caramelized onion mini meatloaf and with a sweet potato and sage topping.
So that's like the frosting for the muffin.
Right, and I've already made this up, and this has been pureed in the food processor with some fresh sage, with garlic, coconut oil, and bone broth to make it into a puree.
So you sauteed the potatoes before?
I did, so you can either bake them in the oven or else you can steam them. Either way works really well. I personally like the taste of them better when they're baked. So that's how these ones are done, but steaming works perfect too and is a little bit more nutrient dense. So
yeah. What about cauliflower? Could you do cauli rice as a topping too?
Yeah, what I found, you can use cauliflower as well. I like the taste of the sweet potato better, and kids do too because it's sweeter.
Yeah.
So, and they also resemble, the texture is a little bit more like mashed potatoes than the cauliflower is. So a lot of children that have autism, they have issues with textures.
Yeah.
So I really want to try to mimic, you know, textures that they're familiar with. And so that's what I've done here with the sweet potato.
Looks fantastic.
So the first thing that we're going to do is, I'll go over all the ingredients. So we're going to put in a pound of ground beef, and this is not like, I don't usually make a small batch like this, but this is just for the demo. So I always encourage people that when you're doing any type of cooking, you want to do batch cooking, and that's going to make it easier for everybody. So do 4 or 5 pounds of ground beef and throw the rest in the freezer so that you have meals ready to go when you're in a rush. And that just makes the diet a lot easier to follow as well when you're prepared. So we're going to first add this pound of grass-fed ground beef. This is from a farm that's local to Calgary. They're called Sunworks Farms, and I buy almost all of my meat from them. So we'll add that to our mixing bowl. You can basically substitute the meat for whatever type you prefer. Just always making sure that you know where your meat is coming from. So we're gonna add in, I'm gonna actually add this entire bunch of parsley. And you can play with this a little bit if you think that this is too much parsley or your kids are gonna see too much green and decide that they don't wanna eat it, then you can lower that amount of parsley. We're gonna put 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt in. At this point I don't measure at all, so you can play with it, but if you feel more comfortable measuring, just 3/4 of a teaspoon. These are caramelized onions.
Looks awesome.
That have been pre-made.
Let's talk about how you did that. I think that's important.
Okay, so what I did is I just half moon sliced whole yellow onions. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's literally just cutting the onion in half. You always want to make sure that you keep the stump on and then use that as kind of your grounding device to slice the onion. And so I just did half moon sliced onions. I added duck fat. So you want any high heat fat
Coconut,
you can use.
anything, yeah.
I wouldn't recommend coconut oil just because of the caramelization. I think the temperature gets too hot for coconut oil, so I'd stick to a duck fat or a lard or a ghee.
Okay.
When you combine two fats together, you increase the smoke point of the fat. So if you were going to use coconut oil or that's all you had available, I would combine that with ghee or another fat.
Okay.
It takes about 15 or 20 minutes to get them to this level of caramelization, and I added fresh thyme to the caramelization process. So that's all that's in these. So we're gonna take them, this would be a little bit too stringy if this was in the meat muffin, especially for kids. So we wanna puree that to a size and texture that is undetectable to kids, knowing that there's onions in there.
And Justine, how long do you caramelize them for people that haven't done caramelization before?
So it takes about 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
And when you're caramelizing, you don't want to be doing a lot of stirring. So you want to let the onions sit and get a nice browning, and then just occasionally stir them gently. But there's not a lot of stirring going on when you're caramelizing.
Right. Cool.
So we're going to throw these in the food processor. Okay, so now we have nice minced onions.
So Justine, you really just pulsed it for like 3 or 4 pulses. Very easy, okay? Just to make sure that it's not stringy and gets caught up in kids' teeth. Awesome.
Exactly. It's just gonna give a really nice sweetness to the meat and additional nutrition. So we're gonna add that to the ground beef. We have our parsley and our salt in there. That was 2 onions. So 2 onions will yield about a cup caramelized.
Perfect. Yeah.
We're gonna add a teaspoon of dried thyme. And now I'm gonna add in a teaspoon of fresh sage. So we're just gonna mince this sage up really small. And you could use dried as well if you don't have fresh available.
Sage is awesome. Love it.
It's awesome. So we're gonna put that in there. We're gonna get our muffin tray ready. So I'm using extra large parchment paper muffin cups. And we're gonna line 1 pound will make us about 4 muffins.
So Justine, anything to look for, just parchment paper? Are there any chemicals that we should know about with these cups? Have you found this brand to be like that?
This is my favorite brand just because it's the cleanest. So, I mean, and I recommend people use parchment paper. Although I don't really know a lot about the purity of it. So that's something for me to look into. So we're gonna line those muffin cups. We're just gonna fold all this together. You just wanna be really gentle with the meat because you can create a toughness to the meat if you over process it. But at the same time, we wanna make sure that everything is really combined nicely in there. We're gonna take handfuls of the meat mixture and just form balls. And just plop them into the muffin cups, level off the top, so that we'll have a nice surface for the topping once these are done.
See, just looking at this, I don't know that my daughter, if I like sauteed this in a pan, I don't know that she would really eat it unless we put a bunch of ketchup or something like that. So I really like the idea of like making this into a muffin where it looks like there's whipped cream on top.
Right. And you think that she would eat it in this form?
I think she would because we eat a lot of like, animal products and stuff like that with onions. She's used to it, but transitioning for a family that's not used to a diet like this might be challenging.
Right.
And that's why I love the idea of making it into a muffin. So it's an awesome tip.
You know what? We're gonna do one more, Mike. If you want to grab a little muffin cup from there.
I'll do that. No problem.
Perfect. And we'll make, so this batch is gonna make 5. And again, just depending on the size that you make, will determine how many you get out of each pound of meat. But again, I really recommend that when you do these, to do a large quantity of meat so that you're not stuck in the kitchen constantly. So we're gonna take these little meat muffins, the oven is set to 350 degrees, and we're gonna cook them for 30 minutes.
So we put it in the oven, Justine, for 350 for 30 minutes, and then we pulled it out. Now we have this amazing looking muffin, but we want to spice it up a little bit, right?
Right, so now we're gonna take our topping. So this is a white sweet potato that I've roasted for about 25 minutes at 350.
Okay.
You're not gonna get that nice browning, crispy effect on the sweet potatoes or anything that you make when you cook at that temperature, but
skin
we're
on
cooking
or
for
off?
health.
It looks like they're skinned.
So I took the skin off.
Okay.
Yeah, for this type of application, I would take the skin off.
Yeah.
But for a lot of other applications, I would leave it on just so that we can get in additional nutrients and fiber.
Yeah, one last question there on the potatoes. Are you putting aluminum foil or parchment paper? Like, how do you cook?
Oh yeah, definitely not aluminum foil. I don't ever use foil, but I use parchment paper on a stainless steel baking tray.
Cool.
So we did sweet potatoes, a little bit of coconut oil, some fresh sage, salt, garlic, and some bone broth. And again, with this, I'll send you the recipe so that you have exact measurements.
Sure.
But I always encourage people to just taste as you go. So we're gonna take a scoop of the sweet potato. We're gonna put it on top of the meat muffin.
Make it look like a cupcake.
Yeah. So this is your icing. And you can tell your kids that if you need to the first couple of times you feed them this way, so that they can have fun with it too. And then I have some minced garlic scapes, and so I'm just gonna use those as a garnish. If you think the scapes are gonna be too spicy for your kid, then you can use parsley, you can do salt or a little bit more pepper. You can play with it, or you can just leave it as is.
Well, Justine, this is awesome. I think kids are going to love this. I wish my daughter was here to enjoy this because I think I might have one after we get done filming.
It's all yours.
If folks want to learn more about your healing chef capacity and like your personalized cooking tutorials and some of your blog, stuff like that, where can people find you online?
So my website is gingerhealingfoods.com. I have unfortunately been neglecting it for a long time, so this is going to be my motivation to get back at it and start posting some recipes. But all my contact information is on my website. So.
Fantastic. And I'll just add that you're big on Instagram, so you do a lot of pictures of your food and what you're doing for families on Instagram too. So if folks want to check out Justine online, click the links below this video. I'll have links to your website and your Instagram. So really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for sharing
so
your
much for
awesome
having
recipes.
me.
This is fantastic.
Awesome, thanks.